Hello, hello, welcome everybody. I'm Jev, yes, Triple V. The accent, by the way, is purely Kiwi. I read old stories for children, so we keep this a family-friendly channel by having bad word blockers, banning bots, and preventing spam. So that means new followers need to wait a few minutes before they can join in the chat. Since these stories are so old, they're now in the public domain, which means they are free to read for anyone and by anyone, the way many Christmas songs are. The digital versions I read are from Project Gutenberg, and you'll find the link for that below. The physical ones are just old books my family has lying around. Sometimes I'll even show them to you. These, by the way, are live reads. Think of them as bedtime stories rather than actual audiobooks. You get the benefits of my mistakes, distractions, explanations, and terrible attempts at accents, along with plenty of chat and interruptions as we find out about things in the story. If you need to do work or chores, then that's fine. Just come and lurk. Please adjust your volume to suit. There are captions available if you have to be quiet or you have hearing challenges, but be warned, sometimes the captions aren't always that accurate. I am a member of the Codex, an awesome group of reading streamers on Twitch. People from many walks of life who share their love of reading, and you'll find links to the Codex reading team and our Discord server below. A special feature of the Codex Discord is the security channel for those of you who stream or moderate. You'll find lots of practical, useful information to help keep your stream and your community safe. So, hang around and come discover adventure with me. You never know what we'll find. Not that one. That one. I'm just trying to get him to sit so I can give him a treat. So we'll see how this goes. There you go. He was standing up and I said to him to sit. And he finally turned around enough that he could put his bottom down. There you go. Now you can lie down and have a snooze. Oh, sorry. I did get everything ready beforehand, you know. Oh, that's right. My camera's sizing is a bit weird at the moment. I'm trying to think of what I've done and how I need to adjust it. It's weird. I don't know. No idea. Just trying to check to see if my phone is trying to tell me something as well. So I'm just going to find where my camera source is and just resize it ever so slightly because, yeah, that's being weird. That's this one here. That looks more like it. Doesn't feel quite so distant. You can lie down now. Yes, you can. Nope, I'm just going to sit here and look at you and make you feel guilty. I am going to have to take my slippers off though because I've suddenly decided to get too hot because I'm waving my arms around. Right, so how are you? I hope you're well. Let's go through the tips first for those of you who haven't been here before. These tips are to help you to make the most of your time here. There's a whole bunch of different ways you can do so. So let's just find it. I'll get the cat out of the way first because otherwise you won't be able to see the tips. Just a moment, find the right one. It's here somewhere, tip numbers. I need tip numbers and I also need this. So sit back and take notes.
Oh, good day. We've stumbled across the
and I need
in his stream viewing
the right
habitat.
captions.
Let's watch as he learns how to better enjoy the stream and make the most of his viewing experience. Let's see. According to the video, there are 6 or 7. Number 1 would appear to be hydrate. We have our hydration right here. It's important to stay hydrated. It's good mentally and physically. And it's good for your vocal cords, other parts of your body, your mind. And that brings us to number 2. When the streamer does drink, you drink as well. Oh, what's this now? Oh, drinking. Drink. Did you drink now? Oh, you can indicate so by putting the water bottle emoji or thumbs up in chat. Next one, snacks. Ah, raccoons has snacks. There appears to be trail mix and what's that? Carrot cake. Ooh, that looks yummy. Oh, I guess we can't have any. Number 4. Is to get comfy. Well, Raccoons has his lucky blanket right here, and Raccoons also has a teddy. Who can say no to that? Don't you have a teddy? Maybe a different kind of plushie. Comfy is good for the mind. Number 5, something to write with or write on, because you never know when you might need to look something up later. We have 2 sizes of pads right over there, 2 pens in case one has really bad ink. Good job, Raccoons. Oh, on second thought, never mind. And that brings us to our final point, which is participate in chat. You can do things like type in chat, chat with other people in chat, use commands, play Jeff Bingo. Raccoons has his own Jeff Bingo card right here. You can spend pages in forcing Jeff to wear silly things on her head, like headbands, crowns, unicorn horns, and perhaps when to it, if I remember correctly, did it already happen? Yes, you can submit quotes. I do another headband. Do it the stream to help that. Or
I just need to change which source is used for my captions again. Right, we're back. I really need to get that one sorted out, but I'm also hoping, sorry, my nose is really itchy at the moment. I'm also hoping that somebody is going to very kindly, with their extra special skills, offer to just to get that a little bit more stable than it otherwise is, which would be really nice. I do like that video. I love it, but I don't have the skills for actually getting it, so it's just that little bit more stable, which I know both Goriki and I would like to see. So just making sure also if I change my scene that I'm not going to end up coming back to the me doing my intro again. So there you go. Done. Sorted. What have we got going on today? We have a new book. Yes, a new, which here means an old book, obviously. So as you can see from the title above, we have The Missing Chums by Franklin W. Dixon, first published in 1928. So it's another one of the Hardy Boys books. Hence me putting that in the various comments for going live, etc. So the title of the stream down below is New Old Book, The Missing Chums, blah, blah, blah. And on the go live notification, which if you happen to have Twitch open or you are connected and your phone gives you notifications for that sort of thing, it would have said to you that Jev NZ is now live. It's Hardy Boys time, New Old Book, The Missing Chums, blah, blah, blah. Except it wouldn't have said blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean. Anyway, so we've got a new one of these because there's one available. There you go. I didn't end up going, what are we going to do? This time it's like, I'm pretty sure I know what we're going to do today. And yes, I should have actually had that already sorted out beforehand, but it was only 2 days ago that I finished the other book. So, yes, very good quote, every time a coconut. Yes, there's quite a few quotes now. You can submit quotes to Goriki for being added to our quote list if you want. I think it's only moderators and me who can actually add quotes. I'm not sure. Pretty sure that's how the settings are. But if you come across something that I say which you think is entirely appropriate to be used as a quote, not me reading a bit out of a book, but actually something I say. Not something that anyone else says in chat either, because we can't give attribution to that the same way. There's no way of proving that that was actually what was said. So yeah, if I say something that you think is particularly apt or humorous or something like that, please submit it for being used as a quote. Go and put it over in the Discord server. Is the best way to make sure it gets seen. Don't forget, you have your notepad and pen or whatever your writing device system is handy, so that if there's something comes up in the story that you don't know about, something that's a new old device, invention, mechanism, whatever, think of a fancy word for all of those things, or a word that you're unfamiliar with. Write it down and pass it on to us over in the Discord server in the Hardy Boys channel, so that we can do at the end of, or every third one of my streams through the book, I can explain them all without taking too much time in the main story time. Let's have a look. Just making sure I've got the channels here. Oh, no, I'm looking in the wrong person's channel. Let's look at my one, not somebody else's. I can't edit their one anyway. And I shall put that folder, the Hardy Boys, there it is. I'm putting it to the very top of the list of the book's channels. There you go. It's called the Hardy Boys, and it's got a picture, a little emote of a guy on a motorbike at the beginning of the title. So there you go. If you have any suggestions of things that you are unfamiliar with that you want explained, or there's even a possibility that I actually have the object around the place somewhere that I can show you, then please let us know over in the Discord server. That's the best way to do it, because then it's on record and it's something that I am much less likely to overlook. Because tell me the words in one ear, out the other. Write the words down for me, almost as quick. Takes slightly longer because I have to read them. But yeah, just recognizing my own limitations with memory. I've never had a great memory for that sort of thing. There are other things my memory is really good at, really random stuff. I don't know why, it just is. It likes patterns. The patterns of the rhythms in words and names, like Franklin W. Dixon. If I was meant to remember what the author's surname was, I would have to actually go Franklin W. Dixon. It's Dixon, just because that's the way my brain works. So this is why often with book series, they will have a double barrel name to them instead of just a single word name. Also, it's much easier to make it uniquely identifiable, such as, so you've got the in it, but you've got the Hardy Boys. It's much easier to remember which series of books you're talking about. The Nancy Drew mysteries, that sort of thing. Everybody has little things like that their brain does that make it easier to remember certain things. And if, as a publisher, you want your books to be recognizable and people to go, that's what my nephew's reading, I'll get him another one of those, because this one's only just been released and I know that nobody's been into town to the bookshop, so therefore I'll be able to get in first and get this as a present for my nephew, sort of thing. So yeah, there's a lot of things where when they're doing book series, they will actually come up with a series name such as the Hardy Boys or whatever, because they stick in your mind better than just it's another book by so-and-so and trying to remember. Because if you've got a series author who does several different series, you want to know that you're getting the right book, especially if they do series in different genres, like some people do. That's why some authors will use a pen name as well as their own name, or a variation on their name. Or sometimes filmmakers will be very clever and play with that. We're getting onto random stuff now, but then we'll get to story time soon. If you've ever watched the movie Hot Fuzz with Simon Pegg and Nick Frost in it, done by Edgar Wright, I think it is, English movie producer, 2 English actors, very, very English. The whole setting is very English. The humour in it is very English. Lots of fun if you don't mind a bit of violence along the way. And it plays with a lot of the tropes of cozy mysteries and English detective stories and things like that. Plus also there's a little bit of cross-referencing for detective stories and buddy cop movies and all this sort of stuff from general media sources. So one of the things that happens in that, where was I going? There was something. I can't remember what it was. Oh no. I thought it was quite funny and I thought it would be appropriate. Anyway, so that movie does a lot of that sort of thing in it, where you take a way of phrasing something and you keep reusing that, but it also becomes a shorthand for something where you end up, you already understand where they're going with it because it's something you're familiar with in other contexts, other movies, other TV series, other books, whatever. That's what it was, author names. So in that series you've got the night receptionist and the day receptionist at the station, the desk sergeant, that's what they call them, not receptionists. The desk sergeant, which is the police officer who does general inquiries over the front counter at the police station. And you've got, let's see, yes, it is. I'm certain it is. I'm just checking this information for you because, yeah, it is kind of relevant. I know, I'm going to get in trouble for going off on a rabbit trail already. Just because I know somebody who's, yeah. Come on, hurry up, browser. It's being extra slow at the moment, probably because I've just been doing something. So there's one actor in it who actually plays 2 roles. Bill Bailey, he plays the desk sergeant, but he plays the desk sergeant twice. And you can tell he's playing 2 different characters because his hair is different for the 2 different characters. I think it's actually the same actor that plays the same role twice. Otherwise, it's 2 actors that have a similar look to them, and their hair is done slightly differently. I'm pretty sure it's Bill Bailey does both of them. Anyway, so one of them, his hair is just normal, and the other one, it's curlier. But each time you see this character, because you assume it's the same person initially, but this is where English movies and TV series rely on you using your brain. They use a lot of subtleties so that things become rewatchable. So you'll see this character, and then a bit later on, he will seem to not know what you're talking about. It's because it's actually the other guy. One of them's the night desk sergeant, the other one's the day desk sergeant, and they are playing with the idea of the fact that it's 2 different identities, because if you are careful and you hit the pause button at the right moment for each of those 2 guys, you'll see that they are reading books in different genres by 2 different author names. One is Ian Banks and the other one is Ian M. Banks. And the reason why that's significant is because that author, it's the same author, but he writes in 2 vastly different genres, and he writes one as Ian Banks in one genre, and the other genre he writes as Ian M. Banks. And so people who read his books a lot know to grab the right one off the shelves at the airport or whatever it is that they're doing. And I know other authors who do the same thing. So it's not uncommon to actually use a name that develops a pattern in your ears, in your mind, when you hear it or when you see it, that you recognize it. So if you're the reader who reads Ian M. Banks's novels, you're not going to go and pick up the Ian Banks novels because the name is not quite the same, and so your brain is not going to go ding ding ding, that's the one we want. It just automatically recognizes it because of the pattern and the sounds and the feel of the word in your head. So it's quite clever the way your brain works. Anyway, so let's get on with doing our reading. That's what we're here for. I do have my drinks and snacks and stuff. I will prove it to you. I have a fuzzy coffee that's lost some of the fuzz. The fuzz being the fluff frothiness on the top of it when you first mix it up. Made it not quite as soon as I would have liked it. We have the water, so we're hydrating, and I want to see that those hydrations have happened. There you go. That's mine. I don't know about you. And I've got my snacks. And guess what snacks I've got today? We are going to be having some Albert biscuits. They're surprisingly, not unsurprisingly, they're very plain, but surprisingly, they're Moorish. They've got a little bit of sugar in, but not enough to be significant. And yet you taste it as soon as you take a bite. So I've got my Albert biscuits with me for today. They would actually be very nice with some very simple icing that goes hard, that has a little bit of flavouring like cinnamon or anise or something like that in it. That would actually be quite good, because then you haven't got competition between the flavour of the biscuit and the flavour of the topping. But they would also be very pleasant with just finishing off a meal where you don't need something that's particularly intense. Anyway, here we go. Let's go reading. We are reading The Missing Chums by Franklin W. Dixon, first published in 1928, and this is the 4th book in the series. Hardy Boys Hydration Game. Hydrate every time someone is fat or age-shamed. That's a thought. We're going to have to see how this one goes, how often they do it this time. Is it the 4th? I think it's the 4th book. Yes, the 4th book in the series. Yeah, there's a lot of that sort of thing in old books. For those who are wondering what Guriki is referencing, a lot of old books just didn't care what people thought about what they said about other people. So that's why they used language about people of different nationalities or different body types or different genders if they're not male. There's always the assumption that they should be at home doing the cooking or the housekeeping or something. There's not a lot of brains going on in the author's perceived mind. Not that that's actually what they believe, but they were writing to a particular formula, and a lot of authors did. And you want to meet the requirements of your audience. But these days, there's a little bit of let's stretch the audience a little too. Yeah, well, if we make it broad patronising, we'll spend half the stream in the restroom. Yeah. Right. Let's see where we're going with this. There is actually a page on Wikipedia about this. I'm not going to read it to you because it's got a plot summary in it for the revised edition and the original edition. I'm pretty sure I will be reading the original edition just because the republication date is inside what would still be copyright, I think. Yeah, the revised edition was 1962, which means it's still in copyright. Yay, because that means we're not having to deal with that. Some of the revised editions work okay, but other ones, they just rewrote them so much. Instead of just taking out some bad words or slightly wonky attitudes, the daughter of the original publisher actually just went ahead and decided she was an expert author and she was going to redo the story to her likings. And so some of them she really rewrote and they don't connect that much with the original stories, unfortunately. So, yeah, there is a plot summary there. The illustration here is not based on the revised edition because in the revised edition, it's got the boys in a boat, apparently. So we're going to just ignore all of that, but if you do want to look at it, it's on Wikipedia. There you go. And that we also have some commands that you can use in chat to find out more about the Hardy Boys in general and the sort of setting that the books are from and all that sort of stuff. I can't remember what else we had in the commands, but you can discover them for yourself. Excuse me, burping. No, that's the wrong one. I'm trying to type in my password upside down. Because then it will rotate Yay, now it's rotated. The Hardy Boys, the Missing Chums. And there's a picture of them. I'm guessing it's the Hardy brothers, the boys themselves, running down a hill being chased by some people. I don't know. We'll find out because I haven't read this one. I read a lot more of the Nancy Drew books just because they were available, and it was really hard to get hold of the Hardy Boys books at school because, you know, they were very popular with the boys. And these were boys who didn't normally read books. And that's what they were written for in the first place, was to get people reading, young people reading, and give them something they wanted to read. Not specifically for the purpose of getting them fluent in reading, but just to give them something that they liked reading, that they enjoyed. And I think they did quite well at that for the era that they were in. So let's carry on. The Hardy Boys, The Missing Chums by Franklin W. Dixon, author of The Hardy Boys, The Tower Treasure, The Hardy Boys, The Secret of the Old Mill, and one other one, I can't remember what the other one was, illustrated by Walter S. Rogers. Now, that doesn't really make much difference because there's a picture which is the frontispiece, and I haven't even got it for you to show it to you. It's just some people looking at some other people from the shadow of some trees. It's not that exciting. It's the only illustration I could find apart from the actual cover. So, yep, there you go, 1928 copyright, made in the United States of America, which means they've actually printed it in the United States of America at the time. And the frontispiece, yeah, I've got it here. It's not going to help you very much. There's the two boys there behind the bushes, and there's somebody on the other side of the road looking like he's sitting there with his head down almost on his knees, and he's got a hat on. He crawled on hands and knees is the caption. So there you go. There's your one exciting illustration. Chapter 1, The Three Strangers. Yay, we've got chapter numbers and titles. I love it when we've got those rather than just chapter numbers which are Roman numerals. Or titles are good, except that we don't know how far through we are if we're looking at what the numbers are. We have to actually read all the titles in the table of contents if they've got one when they do that. So let's get reading. Yes, I know we've got an ad break, but I'm going to read anyway. Chapter 1, The Three Strangers. You certainly ought to have a dandy trip. I'll say we will, Frank. We sure wish we could come along. We sure wish you could come along. Frank Hardy grinned ruefully and shook his head. I'm afraid we're out of luck. Joe and I may take a little trip later on, but we can't make it this time. Just think of it, said Chet Morton, the other speaker. A whole week motorboating along the coast. We're the lucky boys, eh, Biff? Biff Hooper, at the wheel of his father's new motorboat, nodded emphatically. You bet we're lucky. I'm glad Dad got this boat in time for the summer holidays. I've been dreaming of a trip like that for years. Won't be the same without the Hardy Boys, returned Chet. I had it all planned out that Frank and Joe would be coming along with us in their own boat and would make a real party of it. Can't be done, observed Joe Hardy, settling himself more comfortably in the back of the boat. There's nothing Frank and I would like better, but duty calls, he exclaimed dramatically, slapping himself on the chest. Duty calls. Duty, my neck, grunted Frank. We just have to stay at home while Dad's in Chicago, that's all. It'll be pretty dull without Chet and Biff around to help us kill the time. You can put in the hours thinking of Biff and me, consoled Chet. At night, you can just picture us sitting around our campfire away up the coast, and in the daytime you can imagine us speeding away out over the bounding main. That's the sea. He postured with one foot on the gunwale, standing there dramatically. A gunwale is the top edge of the hull of the boat, where the boat comes up out of the water, and then you have the top edge of it before you have the deck and whatever else is going on. The gunwale is that rail around the outside edge. A sailor's life for me hearties, yo-ho, and a bottle of ink. The boat gave a sudden lurch at that moment, for Biff Hooper had not yet mastered the art of navigation, and Chet wavered precariously for a few seconds, finally losing his balance and sitting down heavily in a smear of grease at the bottom of the craft. Well, at least he didn't fall over the side. Yo-ho, and a bottle of ink, and he nearly fell into the drink, chanted Frank Hardy as the boys roared with laughter at their chum's discomfiture. Now, if you're unfamiliar with it, the word chum means friends, or a friend, and we shall just show that to you here. I'm pretty sure that this is going to get it correct. And no, not the ground up fish bait. A friend, a pal. Pal is another old-fashioned word. We don't use it these days. It's used in the title of some games like Pal World, the implication that it's about friends, not about catching animals. Chum, to share rooms with someone, to live together. Yeah, like flatmates, that sort of thing. Off at college when you're in dormitories where you've got a room that you're sharing with somebody else. That sort of thing, that's your chum. Less of an inference of a friend in that situation, although expected that you will occasionally get to the stage of actually becoming friends. Anyway, we'll carry on. So much to the laughing at their chum's discomfiture. Poet, sniffed Chet as he got up. Then, as he gingerly felt the seat of his trousers, another pair of pants ready for the cleaners. I ought to wear overalls when I go boating. Yes, he should. If he's doing mechanicking work on it, there's going to be grease and oil all over the place at different times. He should be wearing overalls. Or at least his rough gear, not his good clothing. He grinned as he said it, for Chet Morton was the soul of good nature, and it took a good deal more than a smear of grease to erase his ready smile. The four boys, Frank and Joe Hardy, Chet Morton and Biff Hooper, all chums in the same set at the Bayport High School, were out on Barmet Bay in the Envoy, the Hooper motorboat, helping Biff learn to run the craft. Their assistance consisted chiefly of mocking criticisms of the luckless Biff's posture at the helm, and sundry false alarms to the effect that the boat was springing a leak, or that the engine was about to blow up. Each announcement had the effect of precipitating the steersman into a panic of apprehension and sending his tormentors into convulsions of laughter. The others have spent more time on boats that they have had control on. Frank and Joe have had a boat of their own for a little while. And Chet, was it Tony who had a boat? Tony Frito had a boat? I don't know if Chet did or not, but I seem to remember that the others all had a little bit more experience with boats where they're in control of the boat themselves, so therefore they're not so nervous about it. And what do they call the town again? Barmet Bay, and the school is something town, whatever. Yeah, it's set right down on the coast, the New England coast, probably in Connecticut. That's where there is a place actually called the same name as this, but the format of the town is quite different. It's probably the old version of it. And quite possibly the author has actually looked at something else that's similar that didn't grow as big and decided to model it on that. I can't remember. But there's supposedly all the key places in the story, not the distant places like Detroit and stuff like that. All of the local places in the stories are meant to be fiction, not actual real places. Biff had made good progress, however, as he had been with the Hardy boys on previous occasions in their own motorboat, the Sleuth, and he had picked up the rudiments of handling the craft. He was anxious to be a first-rate pilot before starting up the coast on his projected trip with Chet Morton the following week. He had an aptitude for mechanics, and he was satisfied that he would have a thorough understanding of his boat by the time they were ready to start. That's good. If the Coast Guard finds two little boys like you roaming around in a great big motorboat, they're likely to give you a spanking and send you back home, laughed Frank, because that was what people did to naughty children back then. I'll bet you'll be back in Bayport, that's the town, inside of 2 days. Rats, replied Chet inelegantly, if forcefully. If our grub holds out, we'll be away more than the week. There's no danger of that, not with you along, Joe remarked, and deftly dodged a wad of waste that Chet flung at him. That would be waste cloth used for wiping up muck. Used in, it's mechanics often use waste rags for cleaning up grease and stuff like that, and so that's usually the sort of thing that they're referring to there, a wad of waste. Chet Morton's enormous appetite was proverbial among the chums. "Just sore because you can't come along with us," Chet scoffed. "You know mighty well that the two of you would give your eye teeth to be on this trip." "Oh, well, we'll tell you all about it when we get back. A lot of comfort that'll be." "A leak!" roared Chet, suddenly pounding Biff on the back. "The boat has sprung a leak! Get a pail!" "What?" shouted Biff in alarm, starting up from the wheel. Then, for the 5th time that afternoon, he realised that he had been fooled, and he sank back with a look of disgust on his face. "Sometime that boat will spring a leak, and I won't believe you," he warned, settling down to his steering again. "I'll be good," promised Chet, sitting down and looking out over the bay. "Say, there's a big brute of a motorboat coming along behind us, isn't it?" "I'll say she's big," Frank agreed, looking back. "I don't remember ever having seen that boat around here before." "Me neither," declared Joe. "I wonder where it came from." And that's one of those words where there's alternate pronunciations, and that's recognised. Neither and neither are the same word, and it depends on who you are and where you live and how you want to say it as to what's the right way to say it. There you go. "I wonder where it came from." The strange craft was painted a dingy grey. It was large and unwieldy and did not ride easily in the water. Although that boat was some distance in the wake of their own craft, the boys could distinguish the figures of 3 men, all seated well up toward the front. Biff glanced back. "It's a new one on me," he said. "I've never seen it before." These are all working and passenger boats here, but this is from around that part of New England. I was just looking for an old picture of, a harbour around then, because I was forgetting that I actually had a motorboat that I could put in that we used last time. I'll probably use that later on in one of the other streams that I'm reading. "It's a new one on me and I've never seen it before. Sure has lots of power anyway," Chet commented. The roar of the engine could be plainly heard across the water. In spite of its clumsy appearance, the big boat ploughed ahead at good speed, and as Bill had the envoy, his craft throttled down, the second boat was slowly overtaking them. "Let's wait till they get abreast of us and give them a race," Chet suggested. "Not on your life," objected Biff. "I'm only learning to run this tub and I'm not in the racing class yet. Besides, there are too many other boats out in the bay this afternoon. I'd be sure to run into one of them." The boys watched as the other craft overtook them. The big motorboat ploughed noisily ahead, keeping directly in their wake. "I wonder if the man at the helm is asleep," said Frank. "He doesn't seem to be making any attempt to pull over." In boating, if you have a boat that's going along and another boat that's coming towards it and this one is going faster, this one has to go around, not expect the other one to get out of the way, because often a slower moving boat is one that doesn't have as much control over their sense of direction, nor to be able to move fast enough to get out of the way. So that's just part of the rules of the sea, is the overtaking vessel goes around rather than the other way around. "I wonder if the man is at the helm, that's steering it, is asleep," said Frank. "He doesn't seem to be making any attempt to pull over." "He's awake all right," declared Chet. "I can see him talking to the man beside him. He won't run us down. Don't worry, not with Captain Hooper at the helm, me hearties." The roaring of the pursuing craft suddenly took on a new note, and the big boat seemed to leap out of the water as it increased its speed and bore rapidly down on the envoy. Spray flew about the heads of the helmsman and his 2 passengers, and a high crest of foam rose from either side of the bow, because as they're moving forward, it divides the water up and often shoots it out sideways. Biff Hooper shifted the wheel slightly and the envoy veered in toward the shore. To the surprise of the boys, the other boat also changed its course and continued directly in their wake. "The idiots!" exclaimed Biff. "I don't get the idea of this at all," muttered Frank Hardy to his brother. "What are they following us so closely for?" Joe shrugged. "Probably just trying to give us a scare." The other boat was now almost upon their craft. It nosed out to the right and drew alongside, coming dangerously close. The boys could see the 3 men clearly, and they noticed that all 3 scrutinised them, seeming to pay particular attention to Chet and Biff. The men were unsavoury-looking fellows. This is common. We know they're the bad guys because they don't look nice. unshaven, surly of expression. So if you want to be taken for a bad guy, make sure you haven't shaved for a few days and you're looking a bit grumpy. And then everyone will assume you're the bad guy. The man at the helm was sharp-featured and keen-eyed, while the other two were of heavier build, the muscle. One of the pair wore a cap, while the other man was bareheaded, revealing a scant thatch of carroty hair so close-cropped that it seemed to stick out at all angles to his cranium. This man, the boy saw, nudged his companion and pointed to Biff, who was too busy at the helm of his own craft to notice. "Not so close," yelled Chet, seeing that the other boat was running broadside in dangerous proximity to the envoy. In reply, the man at the helm of the other craft merely sneered and brought his boat in until the two speeding launches were almost touching. "What's the idea?" Joe shouted. "Trying to run us down?" Biff Hooper shifted the wheel so that the envoy would edge away from the other boat, and in this effort he was successful, for a gap of water was soon apparent between the speeding craft. But in escaping one danger, he had risked another. Two sailboats that had been flitting about Barmet Bay that afternoon were racing with the wind, and they now came threshing along with billowing canvas immediately into the course of the motorboat. Another boating rule. Steam gives way to sail. Powered vessels, boats with engines, have to get out of the way of boats that are using the wind to move them, because it's not so easy to make the boat go where you want it to when you are using the wind as your power to push your boat along. Like if you turn around, sometimes you can't actually move because the wind is right in front of you, and you can't go directly towards the wind when you're sailing. So this is why the rule "steam gives way to sail" came in. So these boys are meant to stop or go round the sailboats. We'll see what happens. And they now came threshing along with billowing canvas immediately into the course of the motorboat. Biff had seen the sailboats previously and had judged his own course accordingly, but in his efforts to get away from the mysterious launch, he had unwittingly manoeuvred the envoy into such a position that a collision now seemed inevitable. What most people forget is you can throttle off, so you're not pushing the boat forward. You can actually slow down. It's like taking your foot off the accelerator when you can see that there's a potential accident ahead of you. And then if you're still not slowing down enough, then you put your foot on the brake. But you don't go straight from accelerator to brake unless it's right in front of you. The sailboats seemed to loom right up before him, not more than 100 yards away. They were racing close together, one boat but a nose in the lead. They were scudding along with the wind at high speed, and the motorboat roared down upon them. Biff Hooper bent desperately over the helm. He was so close that no matter which way he turned, it seemed impossible that he could miss one or the other of the sailboats. If he turned to the right, he would crash into them head on. If he turned to the left, he would run before them, and a general smash-up might be the result. The men in the sailboats were also aware of their danger. The boys had a glimpse of one man waving his arms. One of the boats veered out abruptly, and the yard arms swung around. That's one of the sticks that hold the sail so that it's strong enough to hold the wind for you. Not the main mast, which is the one that goes up and down, but one of the other ones that goes sideways. The yard arm. The sailboat was lying directly in the path of the envoy. The roaring of the engine, the threshing of the sails, that's the flapping, the warning shouts of the boys all created a confusion of sound. The white sails seemed to loom high above the speeding boat. A hideous collision appeared to be inevitable. And then there's a line across the bottom of the page there. And that was the last page in the chapter. I'm going to have a cup of coffee. No, I'm going to have a drink of coffee. And by the way, this book went into public domain this year. And the writer for it, even though it's attributed to Franklin W. Dixon because it's a syndicate author name, the actual writer, like most of the books of the original series, was Leslie McFarlane, who actually is one of their good authors. Some of them are not as good as others. Sorry. Itchy scalp. Let's carry on. Chapter 2, Quick Thinking. Every second was precious. Frank Hardy realised the full extent of their peril, and in the same moment he realised the only way of averting it. Without a word, he sprang toward the helm, brushed Biff Hooper aside. Remember, Frank's done a lot of boating before, especially in motorboats. In this emergency, Biff was helpless. Swiftly, Frank bore down on the wheel, bringing the boat around into the wind. At the same time, he opened up the throttle, so the Envoy leapt forward at her highest speed. So he's making it quickly turn around. The motorboat passed just a few inches in front of the bow of the first sailboat, so close, Chet Morton said afterwards, that he could count every stitch on the patch and sailcloth. But the danger was not yet over. There was still the other sailboat to be considered. It was pounding along immediately ahead of them. The man at the tiller was making frantic efforts to get out of the way, but the danger lay in the fact that in trying to guess the possible course of the Envoy, he might make a false move that would have him shoot directly across its path. Generally, if you're in a sailboat, you need to stay on the course you're on so that the people in the power boat can figure out which way to go. Frank swung the helm around again. Once more the Envoy veered to the left so sharply that a cloud of spray drenched the boys. Another shift of the wheel and the motorboat zigzagged safely past the sailboat and out into the open water. Not one of the boys had uttered a word during this. They had been tense and anxious, but now that the peril of a smash-up had been averted, they sank back with a sigh of relief. "I sure thought we were headed for Davy Jones' locker that time," breathed Chet. Biff Hooper looked at Frank. "Thanks," he said. "I'd never have got out of that mess if you hadn't taken the wheel. I was so rattled I didn't know what to do." That's where having a bit of experience helps. After you've run the boat a few more weeks, you'll get so used to it that it'll be second nature to you. But that sure was a tight squeeze, Frank admitted. It mighty near meant that you wouldn't have had any motorboat left to go on that trip with. Mighty near meant that we wouldn't have been left to make the trip at all, Chet declared solemnly. What say we go home? I've had enough excitement for today. It's beginning to rain anyway, said Biff, glancing up at the sky. I guess we may as well go back. The sky had clouded over in the past half hour, and the eastern sky was black, while scurrying masses of ragged clouds blew overhead before the stiffening wind. That means the wind is getting stronger, with the weather coming in. A few drops of water splashed into the boat, then came a gust of rain, followed by a light shower that passed over in a few minutes. The big motorboat that had crowded them had disappeared. A real storm coming up, Frank said. Let's make for the boathouse. Now, I do remember this from other books. Storms seem to come in here very quick. They'll say the weather is really sunny and it doesn't look like there's going to be any storms. And then suddenly, 10 minutes later, you've got, they say, a shower. And then it's miraculously, it's a thunderstorm with lightning and all sorts of things going on. So we'll just see how it goes. A real storm coming up, Frank said. Let's make for the boathouse. The Envoy headed for Bayport. So these are wharves. Usually a wharf is just a finger of wood or concrete these days that pokes out into the water that you can tie a boat alongside. In working ports, they will have buildings on the wharves, often used as a warehouse where you store goods that are then going to be put into the boats for taking to another place, because shipping is a big way that things are moved back in the old days. Still are, but these days we use container ships. But one of the things that they used to do is if you have, I'm trying to see if there's one here, I can't see one in the background. So sometimes what you'll have is a building that's actually right down at water level. So the bottom of the walls go down to touch the water or just above the water. Sometimes they're actually in the water. And the building will be built up and over the water, and then you can take your boat right inside it. And it's like a garage for a boat. That's a boathouse. There you go. The Envoy headed for Bayport. I'd like to tell those three fellows in that other boat what I think of them, declared Biff. Just in case you hadn't figured it out, Biff likes to confront with a little bit of strength. That's the implication when he's got a name like that, isn't it? They got us into that jam. They were crowding me so close that I didn't have a chance to keep an eye on the sailboats. I still can't see why they drew up alongside, Joe observed. They seemed mighty inquisitive. Gave us all the once-over. I'm wondering if it's because of the particular boat. I don't think this is a brand new boat. It may be that they recognised the boat and it used to belong to somebody who was enemies of the guys on the other one. I don't know. Chet offered a solution. Perhaps they thought we were someone else, and when they found out their mistake, they went away. But they didn't go away, Frank pointed out. They kept crowding us over, and one of them pointed at Biff. At me? Yes. I didn't notice that. He seemed to recognise you and was pointing you out to the other men. Oh dear. Or mistook it for a boat that should have been there. Yeah, quite possibly that. Biff probably meets a description of a chap that they meant to be giving the once-over to, because he's been doing something that's been impinging on their criminal empire or something, because, you know, this is the Hardy Boys, there's always crime involved somewhere. So, yeah, I think you're right there, Guriki. They mistook it for a boat that should have been there. Maybe it's the idiot. It could be the idiot police, yep. Out with another chip on their shoulder. I don't think they're going to run out of chips. They've probably got potato patch out the back and a deep fryer in the front room. Well, if he recognised me, I can't return the compliment. I never saw any of them before in my life. He was probably pointing you out as a unique specimen, ventured Joe with a grin. Probably those fellows are from a museum, Biff. They'll likely make an offer for you for your carcass after you're dead, and they'll have it stuffed and put on display in a glass case. That's why they were so interested. Joe's suggestion elicited warm words from Biff, and a friendly struggle ensued. Inasmuch as Biff Hooper was the champion boxer and wrestler of Bayport High, Joe was at a disadvantage and paid for his derogatory remarks by being held over the side by the scruff of the neck and given a ducking until he pleaded for mercy. And if you're unaware, a ducking means shoving someone's head under the water. By the time the boys reached Bayport, it was raining heavily, and after leaving the envoy in the boathouse, they raced up the street to the Hardy Boys' home. Scrooge had nothing, so I bought the full 1,000 daily allotment. Excellent that you were able to spend on something, but it's a shame about Scrooge not having anything worthwhile there. Sorry, Goriki's talking Disney Dreamlight Valley at the moment, and if anyone wants to find out more about it, we have commands for it too. Not about what he's specifically doing at the moment and telling me about, but yeah. There's a table I might need. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Be interested to see what that one looks like. Thank you. The thing with Disney Dreamlight Valley is you can actually visit a friend's valley now and go into Scrooge's store, because each person's iteration of Scrooge's store has different stock on any one day. It's just randomized. That's what you're going to get for the day. And because you can now actually visit your friend's valley and go into Scrooge's store, you are also allowed to buy from their store. So if they have something in their store that you haven't got, as long as they've done their shopping already, then you get to actually get it sooner than you would if it was just waiting for it to randomly arrive in your Scrooge store. So yeah, it's definitely a lot better now that they're letting us do that instead of just running around and looking at things, because that was really boring since that was all they originally let us do. Oh, and pick flowers off the ground. I think that was about it. There wasn't a lot you could do. Anyway, by the time the boys reached Bayport, it was raining heavily, and after leaving the envoy in the boathouse, they raced up the street to the Hardy Boys' home. The barn in the backyard was a favourite retreat of the chums, and there they spent many of their Saturday afternoons. The barn was fitted up with a gymnasium, with parallel bars, a trapeze, boxing gloves, and a punching bag. A trapeze is those swing bars that hang down from the ceiling that you see in circuses. And was an ideal refuge on a rainy day. The thrilling experience with sailboats and the mystery of the strange motorboat was soon forgotten. The thing with the Hardy Boys mysteries is you can see what's going to happen before it happens, but you tag along for the ride. And part of it, because they were written for young teenagers and preteens, is it was helping them to spot what was going to happen and then read along to see how it happened and go, yep, I saw what was happening. And it gets them a lot more involved in the story. It's actually a very effective storytelling technique for getting the reader's involvement and commitment to the story when it's done well. Bill Cohen and Tony Preto, that's two of their other friends, obviously the Jewish guy and the Italian guy. School chums of the Hardy Boys drifted in during the afternoon, as well as Jerry Gilroy and Slim Robinson. This comprised the gang, that's their bunch of friends, of which the two Hardy Boys were the leading spirits. Frank and Joe Hardy were the sons of Fenton Hardy, an internationally famous detective. Now, here we have the explanation of the general story idea with the Hardy Boys. And one of the things that people like about the Hardy Boys books is you don't have to start and explain everything every time you start a new book. You wait until you've got people gripped with what's going to happen next and why have they forgotten about that boat running them down and they should be worried about this, and then they'll give you a bit of background to the story. And just like at the very end of the book, they will give you a little bit of an intro to the next story. And it's basically, it's in media res. They start with you right in the middle of action in the story, and so you want to go with it. You know, when you're watching an action movie, if they start off by, oh, so and so was born in such and such a place, and his dad was from so and so, and his mum was from such and such, and this was her racial background, and that was his racial background, and they got married at this age, and they lived at her auntie's house until the son was going to be born, and blah blah blah. You don't start an action story like that. Nobody wants to listen. That's a drama. That's boring. Sorry if you like dramas, but that's how they work. Hi, Cosma, great to have you here. Here to decompress, feeling road sick from the heat and in a car too long, plus travel anxiety. Will lurk while I pack my suitcase for air travel tomorrow. Thanks for your chill vibes. You're most welcome. Lovely to have you here, and hopefully I don't get too wound up with storytelling today. So yeah, no, I totally understand all that. So hopefully it's going to go well for you with the air travel as well as just being able to chill now while you get ready. So yeah, that's basically the setup on how they tell these stories so that you get interested in them. So we'll carry on with it. I don't need to explain that again. Oh, and Goriki has redeemed area. What's all this about? And we're going to have the rotator of headbands telling us what we're going to have. I think that one's hilarious, that gif. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Here it comes. There's the wheel. The rotator of headbands is picking for us. What today? We have Fluffheart. Oh no! No, I don't think that's fair. I think we need to have another spin on that. Realised my travel medicine for the nausea and dizziness expired in 2021. Oops, haha, no time to shop though. Is it something that's going to be safe to still take? Because sometimes it's worth it. Oh dear. I'm going to reject that one, Goriki, and you can redeem it again. Oh, you probably can't. See if you can redeem it again, and we'll see if we can get another spin with a different headband result. Just because he gets Fluffheart so many times, or he used to. Waiting. He's going to let me know if it won't let him redeem it again. Yeah, I think it might be okay, just maybe not as strong. Yeah, excellent. Fluffheart and another. It hasn't spun again. Oh, yes, you do regularly get Fluffheart and one other one. That's true. You do. Just let me know if it's going to let it work for you or not. Yes, he has been able to redeem it. Good. Time for the picker of choosing. That's what it's called now. Here we go. We're going to wait for it to turn up. I hope it's going to turn up soon. Yes. Yay. It might be that the GIF only comes every so often. I'm not sure. And what do we have this time? Bow sequence. That's not the one that you regularly get along with Fluffheart. I'm just going to drag over the treasure chest. Bow sequins. Let's find it. I know top knots is one of them, but it's not the actual one. Let's put this in here. Bow sequins. Looking for bow sequins. You're in here somewhere. I know that much. Bow sequins. Yes, got it. This one. Sorry, I didn't mean to disturb you. Okay, just relax. You can snooze. Yes, you can. Are you expecting me to give you something? Really? Someone's looking at me with expectation on their face, hoping that I'm going to give them something. I'm just going to snip off a thread because otherwise it's going to annoy me and I'll end up pulling it and making them come undone. There you go. Bow sequins have arrived, and I shall turn on the... Apparently my dad may have tore a leg ligament playing outside with my younger brothers in the Canadian Shield. He missed a rock jump and we had to shop Costco with him on his cane and me post-surgery. Oh no! LOL. Was very slow. He just stopped moving and said, go on without me. Yeah, I can imagine he would. I don't know how. I didn't know until I saw him. He was still determined to go. Oh, ouch. That's not good. Egg timer. Egg timer. There's egg timer. Yes, there it is. And turning it on over here. Start. This, for those the uninitiated, this is now going, I'm going to wear this bow for 6 minutes, which is how long that runs for. There you go. We'll carry on with the story. Getting to realise how stubborn he'll be as he ages. Had to remind him to get his cane. Yeah. There's some people just, it's set in your mind this is what you're going to do, even if it was before an incident happens, and they just carry on with it. Stubborn. Yeah. There's places for stubbornness, and there's times when it's just like, no, now's the time to pause and stop. Oh, speaking of stubbornness and canes, PJ at one stage in the early days of him being stopping working with the exhaustion because he has major fatigue issues. No, it's not actually chronic fatigue, but it's probably got some similarities. Anyway, so when we used to still have the department store along the road from us, the warehouse, we would go in there and he would come in with me just to sort of be my emotional support animal in the shop sort of thing. And he would take his staff. He has like one of those fighting staffs sort of thing, but he doesn't use it for fighting, but he uses it for walking, and it's quite long. And so he'd take it, and then he'd just, if he needed to, he'd just hold on to it and lean on it when he needed a break. I actually had one of the staff members say to me one day when he'd gone back out to the car, a bow staff, probably, I don't know, it's one he bought, the actual, not just as a broom handle, because it's much longer than that and it's a different sort of timber, much stronger. One of the staff members said to me afterwards, when he'd gone out to the car ahead of me, because I was still dealing with some stuff at the checkout, they said to me, look, if he ever needs it, we've got a wheelchair here. Don't feel bad about asking for it. It's for people to be able to use if they need it. It's not about whether someone has a permanent disability, but please ask for it if you can't see it. We have no trouble with him using it. And so I told him afterwards, he and I were both quite touched. They actually thought of that because they knew, they have seen him for years since he was, quite a lot younger, and they know what he's capable of and what he's not capable of with getting around. And they could see that he really was seriously having major issues with being able to keep moving and fatigue. Because when it's really bad, if he's in the middle of walking somewhere and he suddenly gets overwhelmed by this fatigue, he'll stop, he'll hold on to whatever is nearby to stop him falling over, or his staff if he's got it, and he'll go white and start sweating, and he doesn't look healthy at all. It's just like suddenly all of this happens at once. Goriki says, what a polite way to say that's a big stick, but rather it not be in here too. Actually, no, they didn't mind. They did say, no, it's okay, but if he needed to, then he can. So, but yeah, in other places it would be. If we go into the unemployment office, because the sickness benefit is part of that, we know because they have had people being quite threatening in there from time to time, even though it's the staff there have no say in the decisions that are made by government departments. So when we go there, he will go in with his staff and check his staff with the security guy just inside the door and say, here, please look after this for me, because he will also have his grandmother's walking stick that he's brought with him. He'd rather walk with the staff, not the walking stick. It's actually something you can lean on better than the stick. But they do recognise that he's at least making an attempt to comply and not be threatening. Because that's one government department where you're not allowed to take threatening objects in with you. So they'll let him come inside the door, and then as long as he checks the stick and the staff, and they don't mind. I realised he should go ask for an electric wheelchair. Ironic. And he said, no. I kept at it, though. He stopped and held the cart at the front and stopped moving. Well, that's what happened to me too yesterday. Exactly that, yeah. My mum made me do some stuff, not remembering my limits. Yeah. It's one of those things. Sometimes it takes somebody seeing what's happening to you for them to suddenly go, oh, that's right. Especially if it's not a state that you're normally in. I'm glad I'm not the only one. It's what I'm recovering from today with the road sickness, definitely. Anything like that overwhelms your ability to cope, and so therefore it takes a while for your body to cope with other things that are not your normal, ordinary level day-to-day stuff. So if you're doing lots of driving, you will get seasick, car sick. Sorry, seasick is my generic term for travel sickness. You will get car sick much more easily if you're exhausted, things like that, because your body's not making the adjustments as easily. Completely pale, eyes ahead, can't move, absolutely. All of that sort of stuff. So, yeah, it's good if you're around somebody who understands what's going on. Sadly, PJ's been in this sort of state for the last 2.5, 3 years, I think, now. It's not as bad as it was, but it's still not great. And so there's a lot more of recognition within the family that that's what's going on. So if he's with me, then I'm aware. But it does mean that, it's very limiting for what you can and can't do. It's one thing to want to not be working so that you can play on your computer. It's another thing to not be able to work because you are so exhausted and you get bored playing on the computer, or exhausted while you're playing on the computer, and it's like, well, I can't actually sleep. So what am I going to do? If I can't sleep, to get more rest, to be unfatigued. It's kind of like catch-22. You need more sleep, but you can't sleep, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, lie in the dark, that's right. And he's done a bit of that, but not being able to sleep doesn't help. Definitely not. So, yeah, I do take him out with me, and we've discussed it. When I go and get groceries, I'll take him out with me. If I have to go into the supermarket, into the grocery store to get more than just the already booked collection, he will usually just wait in the car for me, and I'm okay with that. Occasionally, like if we go to the department store, he will come in with me, and we'll get a trolley, and then if he needs to, he can lean on that for a while, or he'll go over to the Lego and just stand there and look at the Lego for a bit, and that will give his brain, even if it's not his body, it'll give his brain a little bit of a break, because Lego's something he enjoys. ADHD kicks in. To not lie there too long. Yeah, definitely. That's why for me, if I can't sleep, I will get up, because otherwise it just gets worse and worse and I get more and more awake. But that's the insomnia side of it for me. Anyway, just chill. Just chill. Take it as you can. Push yourself where it's appropriate, but not beyond that, because you do need to recover as well. And it does take a long time, especially with major operations. And then also with your dad, not that you can do much about that, because, yeah, he's stubborn. But, yeah, if he can rest stuff and elevate it and ice it and things like that, if it's a torn ligament or anything like that, I'm guessing he's got anti-inflammatories. Anything like that should help along the way. Right. Frank and Joe Hardy were the sons of Fenton Hardy, an internationally famous detective. Ooh, internationally. Mr. Hardy had been for many years a detective on the New York police force, where he was so successful that he went into practice for himself. That means he could then do consulting detective work. His two sons already showed signs of inheriting his ability, and in a number of instances had solved difficult criminal cases. The first of these was the mystery of the theft of valuable jewels and bonds from the Tower Mansion, which was the mystery of the Tower Mansion, an old-fashioned building on the outskirts of Bayport. Oh, okay, sorry, got the title wrong. It's going to tell us anyway. How the Hardy Boys solved the mystery has already been related in the first volume of the series entitled The Tower Treasure. So one of the things that's great with these series is you can start anywhere you want, but if you do want to go back to the beginning, often they will give you a hint like this. Britain, Canada, and the US. What was that with reference to? It's a pity that anti-inflammatories don't stop people from yelling at the TV. Yeah, definitely. That would be nice. Internationally, yeah, that's it. Britain, Canada, and the US. Excuse me, itchy nose. Right, and get that nose stud out of the way as well. And then we can carry on. Yay! I do love the little extra comments and stuff though too. So that's not telling you guys to not do those. It's just I will try hard not to get over distracted by the comments and just do little wee comments about in response. Yeah. So there you go. We've had the reference to the original book, The Tower Treasure, the first volume in the series. In the second volume, The House on the Cliff, the Hardy Boys and their chums had a thrilling experience in a reputedly haunted house on the cliffs overlooking Barmet Bay. This was the starting point of an exciting chase for smugglers in which the Hardy Boys came to the rescue of their father after undergoing many dangers in the cliff caves. The third volume of the series, The Mystery of the Old Mill, which precedes the present book, relates the efforts of the Hardy Boys to run to earth a gang of counterfeiters operating in and about Bayport, and their efforts to solve the mystery surrounding an abandoned mill in the farming country behind Barmet Bay. I'm not going to say back of. Darn, should have made chum the hydrate word. What word did you put for the hydrate word? I can't remember, sorry. Frank Hardy, a tall, dark-haired boy of 16, was a year older than his brother Joe and usually took the lead in their exploits, although Joe was not a whit behind his brother in shrewdness and in deductive ability. Oh, that's right, fat or age shaming. Mrs. Hardy viewed their passion for detective work with considerable apprehension, preferring that they planned to go to a university and direct their energies towards entering one of the professions. But the success of the lads had been so marked in the cases on which they had been engaged that she had by now almost resigned herself to seeing them destined for careers as private detectives when they should grow older. Yeah. One of the comments that Goody had made right at the very beginning was, let's see how much body shaming is going to go on and age shaming, because of the fact that that just sort of tends to happen in these older books, and also to do with, you know, the bad guys always look a certain way, the good guys always look a certain way, and all that sort of stuff. And so it was a drink when you hear sort of comment. Yeah, poor friend gets targeted too. Yeah, that does happen a bit. That's why I referenced the fact that here we go, we've got now we've introduced the Jewish friend and the Italian friend, because they were accepted, but kind of still socially seen as outsiders, sadly. And also here we have a bit of educational snobbery. Mother wanted them othered, yes. Mother expected them to get into the professions, like going to university and getting a degree and becoming a lawyer or a doctor or whatever else it is you go to university for. Because that's what you do when you're clever and smart in these things, and it's the epitome of what you ought to aim for. Well, I'm sorry, that only works if you're the right person for that, and that doesn't mean they're any better than somebody else, thankfully. But there's still a bit of that happens in this day and age. Anyway, let's carry on. Enough of that. That's me getting off on a little tangent now. Just now, however, detective work was furthest from their thoughts. Frank and Tony Preto were engaged in some complicated manoeuvres on the parallel bars. Joe was taking a boxing lesson from Biff Hooper, and Phil Cohen was trying to learn how to walk on his hands under the guidance of Jerry Gilroy and Slim Robinson. As for Chet Morton, the mischief maker, he was sitting on the windowsill, meditating, and when Chet Morton meditated, it usually meant that a practical joke was in the offing. Oh dear. "I'll bet you can't skin the cat on that trapeze, Jerry," he called out suddenly. Jerry Gilroy looked up. "Skin the cat?" he said. "Of course I can." "I bet you can't." It's a particular manoeuvre, and it involves going through a very narrow space, I think. Doesn't mean actually taking the skin off a cat, thankfully. I bet you can't. I bet I can. Can't. Can. Do it then. Watch me. Very easy to get him to do it, isn't it? God knows who chose that name. Yeah, I don't know. It's terrible. As every boy knows, skinning... Thankfully, he's going to explain it for us. As every boy knows, maybe we've got girl readers and they don't know, so here's our excuse to educate the boys who don't want to admit to not knowing. Skinning the cat is an acrobatic feat that does not necessarily embrace cruelty to animals. Jerry Gilroy was not unjustly proud of his prowess on the trapeze, and Chet Morton's doubt of his ability to perform one of the simplest stunts in his repertoire made him resolve to skin the cat as slowly and as elaborately as lay within his power. He grasped the trapeze bar with both hands, then swung forward, raising his feet from the floor, bending his knees. Chet edged forward, presumably to get a better view of proceedings. Don't think so. But at the same time, he tightened his grip on a long, flat stick that he had found by the window ledge. Jerry slowly doubled up until his feet were above his head, immediately below the bar, and then commenced the second stage of the elaborate back somersault, coming down slowly toward the floor. Author could feel the concerned letters from parents, yeah. At this juncture, the rear of his trousers were presented as a tempting mark to the waiting Chet. This was the stage of the feat for which the Joker had been waiting, and he raised the flat stick, bringing it down with a resounding smack on his human target. There was a yelp of pain from Jerry and a roar of laughter from Chet. Doubled up on the bar as he was, Jerry could not immediately regain the floor, and Chet managed to belabour him twice more before the unfortunate acrobat finally found his footing. There he stood, bewildered, rubbing the seat of his trousers with a rueful expression on his face, while Chet leaned against the wall, helpless with laughter. The other boys joined in the merriment, for they had stopped to witness the incident, and after a while Jerry achieved a wry smile, although he looked reflectively at his tormentor, as though wondering just what form his revenge should take. No one enjoyed Chet Morton's practical jokes more than he did himself. He whooped with laughter, wiped the tears from his eyes, and leaning out of the window, spluttering with mirth, "Oh, boy," he giggled, "that expression on your face!" Then he was away again, leaning against the windowsill, weakly shaking with laughter. Jerry Gilroy tiptoed quietly up behind him. A quick movement, and he lowered the window until it was against Chet's back, because Chet's still leaning out. The practical joker suddenly stopped laughing and turned his head. "Hey, what's the matter?" he inquired. He was pinned down by the window, and he could not see Jerry picking up the flat piece of board that had been the instrument of torture a few minutes previously, but a suspicion of the truth came to him, and a roar of laughter from the other boys warned him that vengeance was due. It came, smack. Chet Morton wriggled and squirmed, but he was pinned helplessly by the weight of the window against his shoulders, and he presented a more tempting target for Jerry's ministrations with the flat stick, and a more stationary target as well than Jerry had presented for him. Smack, smack, smack. He roared with pain, and, helpless as he was, danced vainly on the floor in his efforts to escape. Jerry Gilroy belaboured him across the rear with that stinging stick until his desire for revenge had been fully satisfied, while the other boys howled with glee at the manner in which the tables had been turned. Finally, when Jerry tossed the flat stick away and joined the others in their laughter, Chet managed to raise the window and escape. "Can't see what you're all laughing at," he grumbled as he sat down carefully on a nearby box. Then he rose hurriedly and grabbed the tender spot. "He laughs best who laughs last," quoted Jerry Gilroy. "Guess I've got to get home," announced Biff a moment later, and soon he and the others were on their way, dodging through the rain. Then Frank and Joe put the barn in order and went into the house. They felt particularly carefree and never dreamed of the news they were to hear, or of how it was to affect them and their chums. It's roller coasters with these stories. You've got all this excitement and fun and everything, and it reaches a peak, and then suddenly you get the rug pulled out from under you, out from under you with the last line of the chapter. Chapter 3. A Shady Trio. I'm going to take a snack break. I don't know what you're going to do, but I am taking a snack break. There you go, one of my Albert biscuits. Somebody was telling me the other day that they made some too, but theirs were, I think, based on the recipe that Goriki gave me, because they talked about them being more complex with flavours and ingredients and expensive. Whereas these, the main thing's flour. And I've moved them away from where the ant was. Right. Let's carry on. Chapter 3, A Shady Trio. I'm sure my man is in Chicago. I know for a fact that he went west, and the Windy City would naturally be his hiding place. Benton Hardy tapped the library table reflectively with a pencil. Mrs. Hardy put aside the magazine she'd been reading. Are you going to follow him? I'll trail him right to the Pacific coast if necessary. So that's heading further and further west, obviously. Frank and Joe Hardy, who'd been standing by the window disconsolately watching the rain, that means sort of like, more rain, streaking down the pane, looked around. Who is he, Dad? Asked Frank. One of the cleverest and most daring bank robbers in the country. I've been after him for almost a year now, and it's only been within the last few weeks that I've ever come anywhere near catching him. What's his name? Fenton Hardy laughed. I've made you curious, eh? Well, this chap has about a dozen names. He has a new alias every week, but so far as the police are concerned, he's known as Baldy Turk. Because he's as bald as an egg. He and his gang held up a bank in a small New Jersey town about a month ago and got away with over $10,000 in broad daylight. We do have is it currency? Yes, there you go. That website will give you a conversion for that value to today's value. So ignore the fact that in the actual link itself it's got a date, a year, because the page you will go to will actually be the current page. So $10,000 in broad daylight. Just remember this was 1928, so it's probably a bit of money. That's how I managed to get trace of him again. Even the police didn't know Baldy Turk was mixed up in the affair because he was wearing a wig that day, but he double-crossed one of the members of his gang out of his share in the loot. And that fellow told the police? Ventured Joe. Mr. Hardy shook his head. Not the police. He didn't dare go near them because he was wanted for 2 or 3 robberies himself, but he came to me and tipped me off as to where Baldy Turk could be found. He wanted revenge. I went to New York, where Baldy was in hiding, but evidently some of his friends knew I was on his trail, and he disappeared before I could lay my hands on him. Where did he go then? Asked Frank, with interest. He hid out on Long Island for a while, but I managed to pick up his trail again and went after him, but he was too smart for me. He got away in a fast automobile and took a couple of shots at me into the bargain. I managed to get the number of the car and traced it to Manhattan, and later found that Baldy Turk had left the East altogether. He bought a ticket to Cleveland, doubled back to Buffalo, and managed to shake me off. What makes you think he's in Chicago? Because another member of his gang went to Chicago just a week ago, so I imagine Baldy Turk was to meet him there. In any case, Chicago is a thieves' paradise, so it seems logical that Baldy Turk would make for it there. And you're going after him? Gee, I wish I could go, declared Joe. Fenton Hardy smiled. It's no job for a boy, he said. Baldy Turk is a bad man with a gun. If I ever do find him, it will take some manoeuvring to get the handcuffs on him, I'll tell you. You'll be careful, won't you, Fenton? Said Mrs. Hardy anxiously. I'm always frightened whenever I know you're after one of those desperate criminals. I'll be as careful as I can, Laura, promised her husband, but in my business I have to take chances. Baldy Turk knows I'm after him, and he doesn't mean to be caught if he can help it. He or any of the men in his gang would shoot me on sight. There's a standing reward of $5,000 out for Baldy... Gone and hit the page. out for Baldy, and besides, the Bankers Association have promised me a handsome fee if I can get him behind bars and break up the gang. I won't rest easy in my mind until you're back home safe, Mrs. Hardy declared. Don't worry about me, replied her husband. Only girls and non-binary people, says Coleslaw. Don't worry about me, replied her husband, going over to her and patting her shoulder reassuringly. I'll get back safely all right, and Baldy Turk will be in jail if I have to chase him all over the States. That sounds like the sort of comments he has made before about other baddies. And he'll probably do it with the help of the boys. The boys will look after you while I'm away. You bet we will, Frank promised. I'm sorry it keeps you from going on that motorboat trip with Chet and Biff, Mr. Hardy remarked. Perhaps you can arrange another jaunt after I come back. We're not worrying about that, Dad. We don't mind staying at home. That's the spirit, approved their father. When do you leave? Frank asked. I'm waiting for a letter from a friend of mine in Chicago. If he writes, as I expect he will write, I shall be away by the day after tomorrow. Then let Baldy Turk watch his step, observed Joe. We'll both have to watch our step, answered Mr. Hardy, smiling. If I don't get him, he'll probably get me. Well, I'm betting on you. Mrs. Hardy shook her head doubtfully but said nothing. She knew that her detective husband had escaped death at the hands of desperate criminals many times in the course of his career, and there seemed to be no reason why he should not bring Baldy Turk to book, just as he had captured many other notorious criminals in the past. But this time she had a vague premonition of danger. She knew that her husband would laugh at her fears if she expressed them, so she remained silent. The rain had stopped, and as Frank noticed when he glanced out of the window again. Yeah, she also has a healthy life insurance policy on him. I do hope she has got a healthy life insurance on him. It's clearing up. What say we go out for a spin, Joe? Suits me. And no, I will not be trying to define between the two boys with voices, because basically they're two halves of the same character, the way they're written. Let's go. Don't be late for supper, warned Mrs. Hardy as the boys started out the door. We'll be in time, they promised, and the door closed behind them. The Hardy boys went out to the shed where they kept their motorcycles. Both Joe and Frank had machines given to them by their father, and in their spare time they spent many hours speeding about the roads in and around Bayport. Their native city had a population of about 50,000 people and was on the Atlantic coast on Barmet Bay. There were good roads along both northern and southern arms of the bay, besides the state highway and the numerous country roads that led through the farming country behind Bayport. Chet Morton, whose father was a real estate dealer with an office in the city, lived on a farm some distance off the road along the north arm of the bay, Chet making the daily journey to school and back in a roadster that had been given to him by his father. Chet was as proud of his roadster as the Hardy boys were proud of the motorboat that they had bought from the money they had received as a reward for solving the Tower mystery. Where shall we go? Asked Joe as the Hardy boys rode out of the lane. Let's go to the Mortons' farm and see Chet. Yeah, good that you're back again. You didn't miss much. Just the fact that they have a boat and they have motorbikes, and Chet, their friend, lives further north in rural, and his dad is a real estate agent. Where shall we go? Asked Joe as the Hardy boys rode out of the lane. Let's go to the Morton farm and see Chet. Good idea. I wonder if he's able to sit down yet, replied Joe, alluding to Chet's practical joke earlier in the day. The motorcycles roared and spluttered as the boys sped along the gleaming pavements of the city. They rode through the main streets, threading their way easily through the traffic, until at last they were at the outskirts of Bayport. Finally, they left the city behind and reached the road leading toward the Morton farm. The leaves of the trees were still wet with rain, and the luxuriant grass by the roadside glistened with the heavy drops. The air was cool and sweet after the storm. The roads had dried quickly, however, and the boys experienced no inconvenience. They reached the Morton farmhouse in good time, and Chet's sister, Iola, answered their knock. Iola was a pretty girl of about 15, one of the few girls at whom Joe Hardy had ever cast more than a passing glance. He lowered his eyes bashfully when she appeared in the doorway. "Chet has just left in the car about 10 minutes ago," she said smilingly in answer to their inquiry. "It's strange you didn't meet him." "He probably went by the other road. We'll catch up to him. Won't you come in?" Sounds like she's interested too. "No, thanks," stammered Joe, blushing. "Guess we'll be going." "Oh, do come in," said Iola coaxingly. "Callie Shaw is here." "Is she?" Frank brightened up. Or playing with him, yeah. Frank brightened up at this intelligence, and at that moment a brown-eyed, dark-haired girl about his own age appeared in the hall. "Hello," she called, smiling pleasantly and displaying small, even teeth of dazzling whiteness, because that used to be how you described somebody. I find that a little bit weird, but okay. I suppose it makes a change from the Hollywood stars with their huge, great tombstone straight, enormous marble white teeth. Maybe back in the day people didn't have such good teeth, and so therefore it's just a remark on how she had nice teeth. I don't know, but it's always a little bit weird when an author describes someone's smile and focuses on their teeth. I don't know. Is that weird to you or not? Is that just me? Anyway, small, even teeth with a dazzling whiteness. Mine are not. Too much coffee. "Let's go," muttered Joe, tugging at Frank's sleeve. He was incurably shy in the presence of girls, especially Iola. But Frank did not go just then. He chatted with Callie Shaw for a while, and Iola tried to make conversation with Joe. It does feel like a dentist paid for an ad spot. You're right, Coleslaw. It does indeed. He chatted with Callie Shaw for a while, and Iola tried to make conversation with Joe, whose answers were mumbled and muttered, while he inwardly wished he could talk as freely and without embarrassment as his brother. At length Frank decided to go, and Joe sighed with relief. The girls bade them goodbye after again urging them to come inside the house, and the boys departed. "Phew," breathed Joe, mopping his brow. "I'm glad that's over." Frank looked at him in surprise. "Why, what's the matter? I thought you liked Iola Morton." "That's just the trouble. I do," answered Joe mysteriously, and Frank wisely forbore further inquiry. They mounted their motorcycles again and rode off down the lane out to the road. Hardly had they gone more than a few hundred yards, however, than Frank suddenly gestured to his brother, and they slowed down. Pulled up beside the road was an automobile, and as the boys drew near, they saw that 3 men were in the car. The men were talking together, and they looked up as the boys approached. Something in the attitude of the trio aroused Frank's suspicions, and this prompted him to ride slower. There seemed no apparent reason why the men should have pulled their car up beside the road, for they were not repairing a breakdown, and they were still a little distance from the lane leading to the Morton farmhouse. Then, as the motorcycle slowly passed the car and the 3 men sullenly regarded the 2 boys, Frank suppressed an exclamation of surprise. The 3 men in the car were the 3 men who had pursued the boys in the motorboat earlier in the day. Of course they were. We knew that, didn't we? Frank and Joe drove past, conscious of the scrutiny of the unsavoury trio in the automobile. The men did not speak, although Frank noticed that one of them drew his cap down over his eyes and muttered something to one of his companions. When they'd gone by, Joe glanced back. The men were paying no further attention to them, but were leaning close together, evidently having resumed their interrupted conversation. There was something stealthy and secretive in their demeanour that was far from reassuring them. "Did you recognise them?" asked Frank when they were out of earshot. "I'll say I did. The same gang that followed us in the motorboat. I wonder what they're up to." "Up to no good by the looks of them." "That's an odd place to park their car, so close to the Morton farm too." "They look like a bad outfit to me," remarked Joe. "I'd like to know more about them. There was something funny about the way they chased us in the boat, and don't you remember how closely they looked at Chet and Biff?" Maybe they thought that Chet and Biff were Frank and Joe. "It seems funny to see them hanging around the farm. Well, they haven't done us any harm. I suppose it's none of our business, but I'd sure like to know what their game is. Let's find Chet and tell him. They increased their speed and before long overtook Chet Morton on the shore road, but Chet laughed at their fears. "You're too suspicious," he said. "They had probably just stopped to fix a tyre when you came along. However, we'll go back to the farm and see if they're still on hand." But when the boys drove back to Morton Farm, they found that the mysterious trio and the automobile were no longer in sight. And that's the end of the chapter. So I'm going to have a cup of coffee. No, I'm going to have a mouthful of coffee, as I've already said previously. Sorry, I'm just looking for ants. I don't know why, but there's a few of them around at the moment. Might be the weather? I don't know. They must be looking for something in particular. Must be something to do with whether they're building a nest, feeding young ants. I don't know. Not happy seeing them though. Chet will be kidnapped suddenly. Yeah, it does definitely feel like that. And then the brothers will have to try and figure out where he is, and then they'll be able to real estate ants, yeah. And then the brothers will be able to figure out where he is, and that'll be the bit of information that Dad needs for catching this bad guy, because it will be linked. It's always linked. Building an army and banquet for Theo. Yeah. Sorry, a bit of biscuit stuck in my teeth. And it was, I could feel it was bothering me when I was reading. Right, we'll carry on. Chapter 4. 11 pages. Itchy. Yeah. Catgam! Yay! He's snoozing. I don't know why he sleeps with his face away from the camera. But he is. Thank you for redeeming that, Coastal. On Monday, Chapter 4, the send-off. This is sending the boys off on the boat, I think. On Monday, Chet Morton and Biff Hooper set out on their motorboat trip up the coast. They were well equipped with provisions and supplies and been up since 6 o'clock that morning, getting the boat in readiness. The Hardy boys went down to the dock to bid them goodbye, and although they chaffed the adventurers and laughed with them, so that's teasing them, and laughed with them, neither Frank nor Joe could repress the disappointment they naturally felt at being unable to go with their chums. Chet was busy stowing away the last of the provisions, and Biff was tuning up the engine when the Hardy boys arrived. In a few minutes, Tony Preto, at the helm of his own motorboat, that's the one we had in one of the early stories, arrived on the scene with Jerry Gilroy and Phil Cohen. Then down the dock came tripping, that means just walking along lightly, Iola Morton and Callie Shaw. The girls have come to wave them off as well. "Hail, hail, the gang's all here," roared Chet when he saw them. "Oi, what a fine day you picked for your trip," exclaimed Phil Cohen, looking up at the clouds, for the sky was overcast and there was no sun. "That's all right," answered Chet. "We made up our minds to start today, and we would start if there was a thunderstorm on." "Brave sailors," mocked Callie Shaw with a smile. "How long will you be away?" shouted Frank. "Until the grub runs out." "That should be about next December," ventured Iola. "It looks to me as if you have enough provisions there to last you a year." "Not with Chet Morton on this trip we haven't," grunted Biff Hooper, looking up from the engine. "We'll be lucky if it lasts us a week. I've seen him eat before." "I'll do my share," promised Chet modestly. Supposed to be a full blood moon tonight too. Well, not quite sure what that reference is for. "I'll do my share," Chet promised modestly. "We should have had the city band down to give you a proper send-off," Joe Hardy remarked. "Doesn't matter, we'll forgive you this time, but be sure and have the band here to welcome us when we come back." "You'll be back by tomorrow night," declared Iola. "I know you. Why, I'll bet you'll both be scared green when darkness comes on. One night will cure you of sleeping in the open." Oh, ominous forecasting for the plot that they shrug off. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, bad weather? No, we're going to go out anyway. Bad guys? No, we're going to go out anyway. Probably thought he played too much 7 days, yeah. Cut out the drawing and let's get started, said Biff Hooper. No use hanging around here. Are you ready? All set. Let's go then. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye. Everyone shouted. Frank and Joe cheered and the girls clapped their hands, and the envoy slowly moved away from the dock with Chet Morton and Biff Hooper waving to their chums. Tony Preto swung his motorboat around. I'll go along with you to the end of the bay, he shouted. Frank glanced at Joe. Why didn't we think of that? It isn't too late yet. Let's get the boat. Would you and Iola care to come? Said Frank to Callie. We're going to get our boat and follow them down the bay a bit. Oh, that'll be great, exclaimed Callie. I'd love to go, wouldn't you, Iola? I'll say, replied Iola slangily. Oh, okay, it's slang. They didn't really talk like that so much then, apparently. They hurried down from the dock and went along the roadway back to the boathouses until they came to the boathouse where Frank and Joe kept their craft. In a few minutes, the sleuth was nosing its way out into Barmet Bay, but already Chet and Biff were a considerable distance in the lead. Especially if they hear them racing to catch up, they will just stay ahead. We'll have to step on it, said Joe. We'll catch them all right. There isn't a boat on the bay that can beat the sleuth. The engine roared and the boat seemed fairly to leap out of the water as it plunged forward. Spray dashed over the bows as the fleet launch headed out in pursuit of the others. Though why fleet? Oh, fleet, fast, not fleet as in a whole lot of boats. We're talking about boats. Frank glanced at the sky. Biff and Chet had certainly chosen a bad day for their departure. The sky had been none too promising at dawn, but now it was clouding over with every promise of a downpour. Coleslaw, narrator. Chet and Biff were never seen again. The sky had been none too promising at dawn, but now it was clouding over with every promise of a downpour, and there was a heavy cloud on the horizon. Then, too, there was a suspicious absence of wind, and the bay was in a flat calm. Okay, so sounds like locally this means a storm is seriously coming. I wish they'd picked some other day, he remarked quietly to Joe. Looks like squally weather out at sea. I don't like the looks of the sky myself. However, they're away, so there's no use saying anything. Might alarm Iola. That's the sister of one of the boys. The sleuth was rapidly overhauling the other boats, although Tony and Biff were engaged in a spirited race down the bay. The girls enjoyed the swift progress and were laughing with excitement as they saw the distance narrowing between Frank and the others. Suddenly, a low rumble of thunder caused Frank to glance up at the sky again. With remarkable rapidity, the huge cloud he had previously noticed had spread over the entire sky. What did I tell you about what they do with the weather over there? Causing gloom to spread over the bay. A few white caps were apparent on the surface of the water, and there was a splatter of rain. Guess we'd better turn back, he said, turning to the others. Why, what's the matter? Asked Callie. Storm coming up. I'm going to read the comments. Narrator. Chet and Biff were never seen again. Chet and Biff are like my dad, who still went tenting when there was a tornado warning. Oh, my goodness, coleslaw. It was a terrible, terrible time. Yes. Oh, my goodness. Oh, I hope that one didn't actually come through, just that it stayed just a warning. Storm coming up. The girls had been so intent on the chase that they had not noticed the lowering clouds, but now Callie gave a murmur of astonishment. Why, it's going to pour, and I haven't brought my slicker with me. We'll be drenched. Rain slicker, raincoat. It was a common name for them back in the day, slicker, S-L-I-C-K-E-R. But what about Biff and Chet? Exclaimed Iola. Well, they're teenage boys. They can make their own call on that. I think they'll turn back too when they see what they're heading into, replied Frank. It looks like a bad storm. As though in corroboration of his words, a sheet of lightning and a violent clap of thunder heralded the beginning of the downpour. The wind came in from the sea with a violence that surprised them, came whistling down across the bay over a wide line of tossing whitecaps, driving before it a leaden wall of rain. So whitecaps are the waves where the top edge of them is breaking as they move forward. Usually means there's a lot of wind pushing it. The two motorboats in the lead were blotted from view, although Frank had seen that Tony Preto was already turning back before the gloomy wall of rain hid him from sight. Slowly he brought the motorboat around. The moaning of the wind rose in volume. Waves slapped at the side of the boat. White spray rose above the bows. The sky was black. The speeding craft fled before the oncoming storm, but the wall of rain swept down upon them with a whistle and a howl. The streaming sheets of water pouring from the dark sky whirled onward by the raging wind. The boat rocked in the tossing waves. Frank crouched at the helm, his jaw set, his face stern. The girls huddled in the stern, seeking protection from the sudden downpour. Joe found a sheet of tarpaulin in a locker and gave it to the two girls, who draped it over their heads, and it afforded them some shelter. It should be flapping like mad and trying to escape from their hands in that wind. I'm sorry, storyteller. Yeah, we caught the edge of it. My dad had to tell us not to leave the tent as it was trying to fly away, because even though we were terrified and it was so wet, it was still safer inside than out. The canoe was thrown far but usable, and after that I think we didn't do another promised rain outing with portages. My dad downplayed it to us kids at the time. That sounds fairly accurate for how dads are. Dear author, maybe try to be on a boat before you write about one. Yeah, sorry for me spoiling some aspects of the boat things in this. It's a lifetime of being on boats, especially yachts, sailboats, because in New Zealand a yacht means a sailboat, not a privately owned large motor vessel, which is what it means in some other countries. Yeah. So, if you were in a storm like this, if you grabbed a tarpaulin to wrap around yourselves, you would have to wrap it really tight and hold on to it really tight. And the likelihood is the wind will still get under it and rip it out of your hands. So forget about trying to stay dry. Just hold on to each other on the boat. No spoilers, haha. I don't have my driver's license, but I can drive a boat. Go figure. No worries. Some of us are like that. Some of us get driver's licenses early and some of us just don't. Some of us needed the incentive of, I need to get it before my 21st birthday because, see, I grew up in the country and everybody got their driver's license as soon as they possibly could when I was at that age bracket, because you could get it when you were 15. At that stage, they've put the age up since then. But people needed it because if you were living out on a farm with your parents and they needed something, you needed to be able to drive into town to be able to get it for them, because we didn't do the same sort of couriers and deliveries and things like that we do these days. And so it was actually a lot more accepted out in the country to go and get your driver's license as soon as you'd had your 15th birthday. In fact, half the kids I knew, they did. They booked their driver's license test for the soonest appointment they could get after their 15th birthday. My high school cancelled the driver's license program the year I would have taken it. Oh my goodness, no. No experience necessary, haha, not even too knowledgeable. Dad got us to once we were able, because living out by a lake, he was sick of minding the motor. Yeah, I can imagine, with having experience and being able to drive a boat. I can't use a sailboat, but I think I might be able to use one legally. Yeah. So in New Zealand, you don't need a license to use a small boat because they're all over the place and people build their own. But you do for a car. And it used to be when I was a kid, you did your theory exam and then you did your practical exam the same day. Because at that stage, if you had a parent with you in the car, you could go out and actually practice driving with them. And you did as much of that as you possibly could until you actually got your driver's license. A bit later on, they changed it. So first of all, you got a learner's license and then you got your full license. And now we have it. So it's 3 stages where you get your learner's license, which gives you permission to be in a vehicle with a licensed driver, but you're not allowed to do that until you have your learner's license, which is when you have sat the theory, so you understand some aspects of it. The biggest thing they want to know is you are aware of risks, potential problems around you. Hi, Arinel, great to see you here too. Anyway, so then you go from your learner's license, you go to a restricted license, and once you've got a restricted license, you can drive on your own or with a licensed adult, someone who's had their license for more than 2 years. You are not allowed to drive with anyone else who's your age range, because usually it's teenagers who get that one. No, you know, that's the stage when you get your driver's license. Unless they are your siblings, then you're allowed to drive them, just because, you know, you might be the only driver in the family who's available to take your siblings somewhere. And also, you're not like to be showing off to your siblings, unlike your mates at school. And then after that, you can set your full driver's license, and then you don't have the restrictions. So with a restricted license, you can't drive after, I think it's 10 o'clock at night or before 7 o'clock in the morning. You're not allowed to be out after dark, basically. Absolutely no alcohol on your breath whatsoever. You do that, you lose your license and the opportunity to get your license for quite a long time. Just because, you know, kids will have a drink once they get into their teens, that sort of thing. So it's a way of making sure that they realise that it's actually really serious. You are not only taking your own life in your hands, you're also taking other people's life in your hands. I'm just going to go back over the chat slightly. Sorry, I missed a bit. I didn't get mine until after graduation, was the conclusion that Goriki came to on what he was saying about them not running driver's license. Yeah, when I was at school, they didn't do it at school. You had to do it in your own time. You didn't have driver's ed at school. I don't know if they do now. I still don't think they do. Well, not in our part of the country anyway. Because some people just don't ever go driving. Coleslaw says, I can't use a sailboat, but I think I might be able to use one legally. I think over 15 horsepower, you could do it online with unlimited tries on the test. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The wind is strong. That happens in the new Twisters movie. Having a parachute or standing in a tornado is deadly. Yeah, absolutely. Under is without the license. I don't know what size mine caps at, or the horsepower becomes captain's license or whatever. Yeah, there's a whole lot of restrictions in terms of what you can and can't do with that sort of license too. It's like with a motorbike, you can get a moped license in New Zealand. It's a really low powered motorbike sort of thing, and if you get a normal car learner's license, you can drive a motorcycle or a moped under a certain engine size for the same reasons as the one with the restrictions with the boat that Coleslaw was talking about. And Goriki has affirmed Arinel is a beautiful butterfly. There was no interaction with any human when I got my boat license. Nice. Excellent. Nice that you didn't have to go and do a test in front of somebody. So Arinel was reading about these soldiers for hire. She struggled with the word, so they were mercenaries. Other than my dad teaching physically, says Coleslaw about the license. Hi, everyone. Yes, hi, Arinel. Goriki. Pride and prejudice. Prejudice. Goriki's playing around with the way that Arinel's been saying some words over on her stream. Anyway, welcome. Thank you for being here. It's nearly 5 o'clock, so I'm not going to run any of the intro video or the raccoons or any of the other videos. I'm just going to finish the chapter. We're nearly there. Along with the other bits and pieces of nonsense that carry on. So we're just talking about how dumb teenage boys are in stories at the moment. Like, the weather is really bad. Why are they still going out when there's a really big storm coming in? I have spent way too much time today looking at stuffed animals. He has indeed. Let's see if I've got one I can wave at you. Just for a little bit of a laugh. Here's a spare stuffed animal. It must have been the year of the goat. Cathay Pacific 2015. Can somebody please check, was 2015 the year of the goat? It was not me. It was because I had somebody in the family who used to be a travel agent. Theodore and coleslaw chilling. Thank you for the redeemed coleslaw. That's really, really much appreciated. Never too much time spent looking at stuffed animals. Right, we'll carry on. We'll finish this chapter. We shall finish this chapter. Where do we get to? Joe found the sheet of tarpaulin in a locker and gave it to the two girls, who draped it over their heads, and it afforded them some shelter. That's where we got off track. The boat was swaying madly as it ran on through the huge waves that surged on every side. Oh dear, that's dangerous. You're better to go into the waves and towards the wind, even if it's slowly, because if you go with it, the wind and the waves can push your boat from the back end when you're already moving with them, so it slews around and then rolls and everyone gets tossed out of the boat and the boat sinks, and a whole lot of dangerous things like that. Thank you for that confirmation. Let's put this goat up here somewhere. Where are we going to put the goat? Can you see him there? Not quite. I'll just hold on to him. I don't want to lean him up against the lamp because it's a lava lamp, so it's hot. You'll also, if the waves are big enough, you'll get back problems in a small boat. Yes, definitely, if you're at the front. All sorts of things like that can happen. So this description of what they're doing in the boat is getting me nervous. Sorry. Frank could scarcely see Bayport ahead through the blinding rain and the gloom. "Where's the other boat?" shouted Joe above the clamour of the storm. Yeah, the thumping up and down, bodies aren't really made for it. No, definitely not. When the boat's going pounding like this, it's bad for your back. Frank looked back. Tony Preto's boat had disappeared. Frank wondered how the other boys were faring. He had every confidence that Tony would make land in safety, for the Italian lad was skillful at the helm and he had iron nerves, so he stayed well focused on what he needs to stay focused on to be able to handle the boat well. But he was not so sure that Biff Hooper and Chet Morton would weather the gale so easily. Biff had only mastered the rudiments of motorboating, and a storm such as this was enough to test the mettle of the most skillful sailors. He wondered if he should not turn back and go in search of Biff and Chet. When he had last seen them, they had been heading directly into the teeth of the gale, out into the open sea. Surely they would not be too foolhardy enough to go on. Because Italians are very good at boats. Sarcasm. Indiana Jones thinks that too. Yeah. Somebody doesn't look like they're happy with me laughing. Hello. Blinking up at me. He's so cute. Oh dear. Surely they would not be foolhardy enough to go on. He glanced back, and when he saw Iola's frightened face, he knew that it was impossible to turn back now, for he had responsibility for the safety of the girls, and there was grave peril in braving the storm just then. He opened the throttle further and felt the sleuth respond as it leapt ahead into the tossing whitecaps through the shifting screen of rain. Thunder rolled and crashed, lightning flickered across the grey void and rent the dark sky in livid streaks. The waves were tossing like white-crested monsters, seeking to devour them. Frank peered through the raging gale, and he could vaguely discern the city lying ahead. A few lights were twinkling feebly, for the storm brought the darkness of twilight with it. The gale had sprung up so suddenly that they had been entirely unprepared. Frank devoutly wished he had taken heed of the warning given by the ominous sky before he started out in the motorboat. He was greatly alarmed for the safety of the girls, because he knew that the storm was one of the worst that had ever swept over Barmet Bay. "Well, we'll be lucky if we make it," he muttered to himself. Then, to reassure the others, he turned and grinned. "We'll make it all right," he shouted, the wind whisking the words away so that the others scarcely heard him. A great wave broke over the side. The boat reeled as though it had been struck by a giant hand. And that's the end of the chapter. Bang! Like that. There is nothing after that. Chapter 5, No Word from the Chums. Oh my goodness. Do I need to read that description again, or did you guys actually manage to catch it? I don't know if it actually served you ads where you lost the story, me reading the story or not, because I will happily read that last little bit again if you need it. One more time, I'm back now. Yeah, okay, I will do. He glanced back, and when he saw Iola's frightened face, he knew that it was impossible to turn back now, for he was responsible for the safety of the girls, and there was grave peril in braving the storm just then. He opened the throttle further and felt the sleuth respond as it leapt ahead into the tossing white caps through the shifting screen of rain. Thunder rolled and crashed. Lightning flickered across the grey void and rent the dark sky in livid streaks. The waves were tossing like white-crested monsters seeking to devour them. Frank peered through the raging gale, and he could vaguely discern the city lying ahead. A few lights were twinkling feebly, for the storm brought darkness, the darkness of twilight with it. The gale had sprung up so suddenly that they had been entirely unprepared. Frank devoutly wished that he had taken heed of the warning given by that ominous sky before he started out in the motorboat. He was greatly alarmed for the safety of the girls, because he knew that the storm was one of the worst that had ever swept over Barmet Bay. "We'll be lucky if we make it," he muttered to himself. Then, to reassure the others, he turned back and grinned. "We'll make it all right," he shouted, the wind whisking the words away so that the others scarcely heard him. A great wave broke over the side. The boat reeled as though it had been struck by a giant hand. And that's the end of the chapter and of today's reading. Here, have a goat. So, tune in next time for what happens next, because the next chapter is chapter 5 and it's called No Word from the Chums. Oh dear, have they been shipwrecked? Did they get drowned at sea? All of those sort of things were possibilities. Oh, I didn't realise I still had that egg timer up there. That was meant to get turned off. What did I turn off instead? I don't know. Anyway, so thank you everybody for being here. It's been lovely seeing you all again. I do miss it when you guys aren't here, or if I have to be doing something else. Next reading, chum is the hydrate word. That sounds like a good plan to me. Also, just so you know, I will be reading in 2 days' time from today, which is for me Friday. See, it's Wednesday here at the moment. But I will not be reading on Monday, which is 3 days after that one, because I have to go to a donkey AGM, an annual general meeting of the committee and volunteers, anyone else locally who's interested, about the donkeys and their care and the park that they live in. So I have to go to that because it's a once a year thing, and I'm not the guest speaker, but I'm the guest story reader. They've asked me to read my 4 donkey stories instead of actually inviting a guest speaker, because one of our committee members, actually, she's the chairperson, thinks that they're wonderful. She doesn't do fiction at all, but she thinks they're wonderful, and we're in the middle of a very long drawn out process of trying to get them put together into a book so that they can be published as educational but fun sort of thing. And the core of them is these stories, and we'll be able to do some other stories further in line with that later on if we choose to. So yeah, I have to be there because I'm the kind of equivalent of a guest speaker, because we try to do something more than just the serious boring business when we have these meetings once a year. So I won't be here on my Monday, which is probably going to be Sunday for you guys, but thank you for being here now, and I look forward to seeing you next time you can make it. Please remember, as Goriki said, the key word is chum for every time you have to hydrate, or whatever it is that you're drinking on the day. And I will see you then. Don't forget, happy reading. Oh yes, let's raid Glacier. That sounds like a good idea. We are going to go and raid Glacier. Don't forget, free raid. Oh yeah, he's already done it, thank you. Yes, and safe, happy travels for you too, Coleslaw. Bon voyage, definitely. I wish you bon voyage. So yeah, don't forget no, not that button. Oh, here we go. Bye.